when Jacob Wetterling was kidnapped in 1989, it set off a massive search.
But somehow, police consistently missed the suspect right in front of them for nearly 30 years.
We're doing a recap of In the Dark Season 1, the Jacob Wetterling case, on this episode of So Much Crime,
So Little Time.
Jeff, recently I was in Bend, Oregon, on a river floating in a tube, and as I was floating there was loads of people with their phones in these protective cases, you know, just scrolling on their phones. Me, I was taking in the views. But if you are someone who wants to scroll on their phones while going down a river in a tube, one of the most valuable things I think you could do in that time would be go to patreon.com/so much crime so little time, because there what you could get is longer time machine episode of this fabulous podcast, early release episodes, bonus content, the most famed and most popular outtakes, and also you would get the warm fuzzy feeling inside, even if your extremities are a little bit chilly from the semi-cold, not really even that cold river, for supporting the show. If that is something you want to do, go there, patreon.com/so much crime so little time. Welcome to So Much Crime So Little Time. I am Dee.
I'm Jeff. And before we start, quick warning.
Warning. It's been so long since we warninged.
So long. This episode will have spoilers for In the Dark Season 1. We're going to discuss the whole series.
If you haven't listened yet, go check out our preview episode. It's the one right before this one in your feed.
You'll also find a link for In the Dark in our show notes.
Okay, so really quick reminder of what this podcast is about. It was released in 2016. The host is Madeleine Baran. It's got 9 episodes plus 2 bonus episodes. Really important to note the bonus episodes here. More so probably than other podcasts that we discuss, because at the very start of this series, we noted it in the preview, but just to call it out here, right as this podcast is about to be published, in 2016, Jacob Wetterling's murderer is found, admits to his murder, and is charged. And so those bonus episodes, more so than I think any other time we've had bonus episodes in a series, are extremely important. So nearly as opposed to 9 episodes plus 2 bonus episodes, you could see this as 11 episodes in a series. Is that fair to say, Jeff?
I think it's the longest way you could have said that, but yes, I think that is fair to say.
Are you trying to say that I'm a long-winded person, not a short-winded? And are you saying that on episode 138, that's where we are?
I just think it took you a long time to get to 11.
And have you taken 138 episodes to make that determination?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Each episode, by the way, is between 30 to 45 minutes long. That's all I have to say about that point.
All right. Before we discuss the series as a whole, let's talk about what we covered in our preview episode, which was basically just what happened in episode 1 of In the Dark. And so in episode 1, we learned about the abduction of Jacob Wetterling. He was 11 years old in 1989 when he was abducted. We basically heard the story of the night of the abduction. He'd gone out with some friends to rent a video. He was with one friend and his brother. While they were coming back to Jacob's home, a man stepped out of a driveway with a gun, sent 2 of the boys running off into the woods. When they looked back, Jacob and the man were gone. In that episode, we also heard about the beginning of the police investigation. Police got there very quickly and began searching for Jacob, but they did not find him. And that's pretty much where we left off, other than what Dee mentioned of noting that 27 years later, we did eventually find out who committed the crime, but we didn't really get into the details of that in that first episode. But that's what we're here to discuss now. So, Dee, I have a lot of notes on this one. Shocking. Where...
Why do you say you have a lot of notes? Did you take a lot as you were listening to each episode, or what was your play here?
I did. I felt like this podcast covered a lot of ground in those 11 episodes. I think, at the center of it was this Jacob Wetterling case, but we heard about several other victims. We heard a lot about Danny Heinrich, the person who committed the crimes. And then we got a lot about the police and I guess the FBI too, but kind of the general soup of the investigation. There were a lot of elements to this. I mean, it's similar to other stories we've heard about before, but I just feel like this was a very detailed podcast. I felt like it covered a lot of ground.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, okay, look, we don't want to go into every single episode. We don't want to do a deep dive into every, note that you've taken. I wonder if we could segment it slightly into categories.
Yeah.
Maybe you have different ones in mind. A couple that I'm jotting down are like maybe the police, the parents, possibly, Jacob himself, and just everything surrounding him. And the podcast maybe as a whole could be like at the end, possibly, and how they dealt with it. And I don't know what order we want to deal with them or if there's a different way. In addition to those categories, I'm wondering one aspect here that really intrigued me, stepping away from kind of those four main categories that I would see, is Jacob Wetterling and his family. They were the main victims. Obviously, the other victims of the abuser and the murderer in this case. But we also heard about a number of people who the police have wrongly brought into, like their character has been brought into question.
Yeah, like Dan Rassier.
Over the years. Yeah.
The guy who lived in the house where the killer parked his car.
And I feel like we need to spend a little bit of time discussing not just, the impact on him, but how the podcast dealt with it. Because I found that really interesting. I know we discussed it slightly in the preview. We were like, well, this is going to be a big part. And I feel like in the first few episodes, I was like, where is he? Where is he? Like, oh, it's not about him. It's not about him. But when they did bring it in, I found it quite fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's start there. So, yeah, this is Dan Rassier. Was he a music teacher, I think?
Yeah.
So he works with kids and kind of had this shadow over him and his life and his career for decades.
But wasn't brought into question until a few years after Jacob's murder, no?
Right. But the media kind of took hold of the story at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't know, I feel like we've heard about this before where someone gets sort of wrongly implicated, if not outright accused. And especially for someone who works with kids, and this is a crime against children, this seems like this has such a lasting negative impact on his life. And he tried to do the right thing at the time. He tried to report that there was this car in his driveway. He offered to help on the night of the investigation, and still he wasn't believed. He wasn't trusted.
Yeah, and not only that, but he wasn't believed and he wasn't trusted. And the police did a fucking shocking job at searching.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, even in our assessment of the first episode, I was like, wow, the police did such a good job. They were on it and blah, blah, blah. And you and I were both like, wow, there's these weird reviews and it's very critical of the police. But we've seen other cases where the police are so shit and they're so slow. But then when you start to absorb what actually happened and how quick they were to blow up the case and how blowing it up and making the search area larger made everything so much harder and muddied the waters so much. And actually the implication on Dan Rassier, like that's a human whose life for whatever 30 years was huge. Like the implication was huge.
It was. I think you touched on something there that I think maybe this is a good time to talk a little about this. I mean, the contrast between Dan Rassier's story and Danny Heinrich's story and what happened that night and what happened in those years after. This is one of those things where I feel like, okay, was the podcast playing this up too much? And I don't think so, based on what we heard in the bonus episodes. Like, I feel like this really was a case of the police missed obvious clues, obvious connections, and they chased down bad leads, or this whole theme of them failing to talk to neighbors and letting time go by, despite how quickly they got to the scene at the beginning. But then just, I feel like a theme throughout this whole podcast, all the episodes, was police never talk to me. Police never ask me any questions. Police never asked me about that. They still haven't come to talk to me about that. So many people said that in this community. And I feel like that's easy to say, like, in hindsight. It's like, oh, like, of course they should have. But meanwhile, you've got this guy committing this crime who was already on the police radar, was following, abusing, abducting other boys. The night of this crime, took a bobcat from a construction site. How do you quietly take a bobcat? I don't know. That contrast between Dan Rassier and Danny Heinrich and kind of how they lived their lives over this time period. I mean, for all we know from this podcast, Dan Rassier was, he lived with his parents. He had this record collection. He was a music teacher. He was just minding his own business. And meanwhile, Danny Heinrich was out there abducting boys, seemingly again and again.
But also, from my mind, when we're doing this comparison, the respect that seems to be shown, because before the Jacob Wetterling case, when Danny Heinrich, am I saying his name right?
Yeah.
Was, do you remember when the police went over because someone thought he was involved in the attack of another child?
Oh, the Billy Hewling, the one from 1978?
Yeah. So the police go over, and one of the police is like searching his property and finds the picture of a child in a towel.
Yeah.
A young child. And what does that policeman do? He puts it fucking back.
Yeah.
He puts it back for him and he leaves. And they have found the police radios, the scanners.
Right. The police police scanner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so they're aware of all this. But Dan Rassier, things are taken from his parents' house that he doesn't get back for 30 years.
Yeah.
What the fuck is that? What is this respect? Like, how do you find something like that picture and put it back? Because what? Because what? In what world is that picture okay? Even if you do not have a warrant, honestly, even if you do not have a warrant and you're not supposed to take it, I don't give a shit. Take it, crumple it up, fucking burn it. Burn it so that at least that child in that picture doesn't have the chance to be exploited like that again. I don't think I'm legally allowed to say that. I mean, I don't. Nobody gives a shit what I say. But like, honestly, as a police officer, do that at least if you can't do anything else.
And to maybe pivot to the parents for a second of Jacob Wetterling, I think what really hit me and was surprising to me was I went into this knowing that they became strong advocates for like child safety, fighting sex offenders, the creation of the National Sex Offender Database, all of that stuff. This we heard from like John Walsh and other people, like Geraldo popped up in here, and that whole kind of space. To hear that Patty sort of realized how that got taken too far, and how people got on that sex offender registry for all kinds of things that were ridiculous, and how they all got kind of lumped in with pedophiles and actual criminals, and was seemingly from what we heard repentant, apologetic, trying to do good, and realized how things got carried away. Whereas the police, from what we heard, until a new sheriff came in much later, and that was I think the second update episode, were unapologetic about what they did. including the FBI, right? We heard about that in the update episode as well. The FBI was like, we did a great job. Like, you didn't do a great job. You let this guy be on the streets, and he still is going to get out of prison too. You didn't even charge him with the murder that you know he committed. He murdered an 11-year-old boy, and you just sent him to prison for 20 years? Sorry, there's a lot of things to be indignant about with this.
Yeah, and then there is Jacob's mother. My God. You know, the people we want to sit down and have a cup of tea with.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I want to have a cup of tea with her. I think the idea, first of all, of them having a phone put in their house is
the phone in their house.
so
Oh my God.
fucking cruel. It's so cruel in so many ways. The idea of people offloading to them. I just had to call you. Like this emotional offload. I'm just like, well, this is so awful. But then also her outlook of what she wanted, which was she's not looking and saying to people, lock your kids up, don't let them go and explore. She is saying, play with your children, eat ice cream with your children, enjoy your children, because these are the like moments, these are the years. I was listening to this as I was on holidays with my kids, or vacation. My son called it vacay, but only when he came back and we were overhearing him speak to his American friend.
I was going to say your American child.
Yeah, he would not speak to us like that. He has like this different lingo with his like American friends than he would like speak to us, or even like his Irish cousins or whatever. Very funny. But anyway, his vacay. And even like towards the end, I think it was in the final, the very last episode, Paddy saying like that, you know, she even thinks of Dan Rassier and thinks of like, well, why did no one intervene during his childhood? There were signs that he
Danny
needed.
Heinrich, you mean Danny
Sorry,
Heinrich.
Danny Heinrich. He needed intervention. You know, he's still from a thrift shop. Like, did he have like opportunities in his childhood where it was very clear that he was struggling and that maybe he was a victim of neglect or abuse or whatever, that people should have been involved to help support him?
Yeah.
Because people are not born child killers. And she's there speaking about the person who so horribly killed her son.
Yeah.
And abused her son before doing that, and yet has that mind frame. And Jeff, that wouldn't be me. I bow down to her because I swear it would not be me. I would not have that strength. I would not be that empathetic. I feel like I'm an empathetic person, but I swear that would not be me. I would be vicious. Vicious is what I would be.
I believe you. But I feel like that's one of the things that this podcast did well, because I think there was kind of empathy abound for everybody pretty much but the police in a way. Like Danny Heinrich even got his moment of, this is like a little bit of understanding of how he ended up like this. A monster, to be fair, like a true monster. But I mean, there was this story in the episode about the sex offender laws. I think the person's name was Marcos, who got caught up in a sting, labeled a sex offender, and basically into forced homelessness because of the way circles are drawn around schools and playgrounds. And there was just nowhere, I think in Miami maybe, where he could live. And just how that affects people who get caught up by
He's
the
like,
sort of overly aggressive
I could
laws.
afford to buy a house, but there's only like 2 houses or 9 houses, but not 9 houses for sale, but like 9 physical houses, and none of them are right now for sale that I can buy.
Yeah.
I was like, what? I think it was 9 houses, which feels ridiculous, but maybe.
But I thought that was really well done throughout the podcast, of just like finding the space to give everyone kind of their story and their moment, and approaching it with what felt like I was thinking throughout it, like, is this podcast being unfair to the police? I don't think so. I mean, obviously, like, this is the version of the story we've heard. I did do a little additional reading just to see kind of like what are other people's takes on this? And everyone that I read seems to have the same take of the police botched this hard for a long time, over and over again, particularly at the beginning. And they don't really deserve kind of grace and empathy for what they did as a unit, as a collective unit. I'm sure there were good people working on the case, but collectively, up to their leadership, they failed. They failed badly here. I mean, they should have put Heinrich behind bars before he ever got to Jacob Wetterling.
Yeah. I think that was the shocking thing as well, because to hear, was it episode 2 and 3 maybe, so many people speaking about this blue car. This blue car that's going around.
And Jared was the one we heard from, I think, the most, who had been assaulted, knew the voice, knew the car, basically all.
And one of the police officers, when he heard it, was like, "This is who it is. I have a prime suspect." And he was on the Jacob Wetterling case, but somehow the connection wasn't made. This is why it didn't make sense. It felt like all the dots were there, but someone just forgot to join them. It's like, did someone not number the dots? Like, is that what we needed? Numbered dots here? Did we jump too far?
I don't know. Like, I was wondering, like, I feel like in another type of story, this would be a case of not believing the victim. Like, is it like this? Jared was a little boy at the time. I forget how old he was, but he was young, like Jacob was. Like, they just not want to have this case rest on, I don't know, let's say a 10-year-old boy or 9-year-old boy, however old he was. I feel like all the evidence was there. I don't get it. And then similarly, I wanted to ask you, like, what do you think? So this plea deal, this 17 to 20 years in jail with no murder charge, in exchange for basically telling them where he buried Jacob in the woods or whatever. What do you think of that?
I think my feeling on that rests solely on what Paddy said, which was, if they hadn't found Jacob's remains, she wouldn't have been happy because she wouldn't have believed him. And they didn't get closure. Closure. Closure is not what happened here. But at least there is some element of, okay, we understand the story of, those moments. The plea bargain got them there.
Sure.
Does it make a difference that he will get out? I don't think so. I honestly don't. Because from their point of view, whether he dies in prison or he dies when he gets out, people know about him. He's going to be on a registry.
Sure.
Jacob's not coming back either way. But with the plea deal, at least they have remains. And they have not closure, but they have that.
That's a good point.
And there is some element. And it was only when she said that I was like, okay. And I'm glad that she said that. I'm glad that herself and her husband said, you know what? Closure doesn't happen when you're searching, when you're missing. She's like, I won't go back to being a housewife. I won't go back to being a stay-at-home mom. That'll never happen.
Right. I mean,
But I know where he is. His remains are now with us.
I agree with that. I think you touched on before you mentioned the phone in their house and how for years they just had people calling all hours of the day. And like this, to me, like this is a continuation of the crime that Danny Heinrich is responsible for. Like he put not just Jacob Wetterling through this, but obviously puts the whole family through this. But the family went through something extreme beyond the horrific crime. Like they endured this for decades. And I don't know, listening to
that
the
has
types
to be part of it though, Jeff. That has to be part of it for him. And you know what pissed me off? It pissed me off so fucking royally, and I actually think it shouldn't have been played, and I think it was played in the preview. Hearing that. The fact that he gets to speak. So in episode, I think it was one of the bonus episodes. I think it might have been the last one. We heard a recap of like what he had said in his testimony. And we heard about what's the guy's name? Who? Jared? Was it Jared?
Jared, yeah.
We heard him say, it made me sick because he said that he was told, oh, if you get sick, I'm going to kill you or something, or you're not going to home. There was some comment. He's like, that never happened.
Yeah.
I know that never happened. And I didn't know whether it was because he was mixing me up with someone else or whatever. I was like, this guy, like, he's just fucking making stuff up. He is up there. Part of this whole narcissism that we heard about throughout this podcast has to be at play here, because it felt to me like Danny Heinrich was being allowed a chance to sit up there, be the king and say, and I said to Jacob, blah, blah. I never saw Silence of the Lambs. I never saw that movie, but it kind of gave the vibe of I'm going to be the person to talk and people are going to listen. And I don't mean that in a like dramatic, I don't at all, but that's the vibe I'm getting here. And when I heard Jared saying like, I'm not, like, that didn't happen to me, it made me even more so annoyed, because I'm like, why is he getting this chance to say, this boy said this and this boy said this to me? Don't fucking give him the mic. You giving him the mic and giving him this opportunity to speak it's akin to when there is a mass shooting and instead of reporting about the victims, the media report about the shooter. And you give a name to the person who has caused the chaos, which creates infamy, which creates this notoriety, as opposed to saying, fuck you, let's give notoriety to the victims because they're the people that matter right now. And it annoyed me in that way. And I think maybe it annoyed me a little bit that the podcast leaned into that. A little bit. Or maybe they just had to say what was being said, but there was no mention of the fact that that's what was happening. And that's what was happening. At least that's what I got from it.
No, I think that's fair criticism of the podcast. I think my kind of on this similar lines, but different. My sort of, I did think that this podcast was overall very well done, but my criticism is that I thought it focused too much on sort of vilifying the police at the expense of a version of what you just said, of really elevating the people like Jacob Wetterling and his family and spending too much time maybe on the criminal. I think you could walk away from this podcast feeling like the real criminal is the police. And while there's truth to that, they did some horrible things here. They're not really like the perpetrator is the one who should be at this, in a way, most of our anger should be directed at him. That's a debatable point, maybe.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. But the police have the ability to shut this shit down. And what we heard in this podcast was not just about Jacob, was about multiple victims of likely the same perpetrator.
Yeah.
That the police could have protected earlier on. But then we also heard about other victims, both people who were put up as suspects and who the police seemingly are still refusing to say are no longer suspects, even after it's very clear that they're not suspects, like innocent people, which is
that's a good
outrageous. Point. But also, like so many other cases where the police just aren't doing their jobs. And if the police aren't held to a high standard, their impact is vast. Whereas one perpetrator, like if you just focus on the one perpetrator, the impact is much more narrow than an entire police system. So I think the whole point of In the Dark for me was, look, yes, it's Jacob Wetterling. And like the impact overall that had. But really the podcast was saying, like, are we in the dark about the entire police force here? Because one question from this, did you know that the sheriffs have no overseer There's no one who's overseeing sheriffs. Did you know that there was no count of how many sheriffs there are in this country? Or police departments? I was like, what the fuck? That makes no sense. Just create an Excel sheet. I don't know. It seems so easy. Like,
this has come up before because, well, it's come up before on this podcast because we've talked about how
we've talked about this.
Yeah, how some of these things, like police forces, don't talk to each other. There's no sort of there's a lack of national databases, but also in
we've never discussed the fact that a sheriff has no one overseeing them. And also the fact that there is no idea within this country how many police departments there are and how many sheriffs there are in the country. Like, there's nobody knows. The number, I can't remember the number that was spouted out, but it was somewhere between 3,000 and 6,000. Like, I was like, guys, that number isn't close. Like, that is not a close number. Like, that's not close.
Who can even say how many states there are? Like, it's...
I mean, some immigrants might say 50. Ballpark.
But I actually, the reason this was top of mind for me was, I think it was in your town or my town, one of the towns around us in the last election.
Your town or my town.
Had a ballot initiative to change the way that sheriffs are chosen from election to selection, basically to have some accountability to, I think, the city council, and that, I think, lost its vote. I think the sheriff is still elected by the people, and once elected is essentially all powerful. And I mean, the example we heard here was what's his name, the guy in Arizona, whose name I'm not upset that I don't remember, but that's the case all over the country, where there are sheriffs who just sort of lack any sort of accountability, aside from the lack of interconnectedness between police departments around the country, or even how many police departments there are. But you combine these facts with like this police department, and they're I think at one point they had a 12% clearance rate. 12%.
There was a single digit clearance rate at one point. So I was looking up this whole part 1 and part 2 clearance rate, because I was like, sorry lads, are you joking here? Are you getting paid to do this shit? Or you can't, you're just not doing it, and that's okay. And so much so that people don't even know. You don't even know what your clearance rate is, and that's okay. This is wild. You're not worried about this? This is wild. And also, not even that, but you're not retrospectively being we could do something better. We do retros every 2 weeks, Jeff. You're aware of this. We do this in work every 2 weeks. We look back over the minutiae of the work that we've done, how we've worked together. I'm aware we're not solving crime. I'm aware we obviously have a little bit more time on our hands than sheriffs and police departments around the country. But seriously, we look back and we say, hey, how could we approach things differently? How could we work better, more cohesively, more efficiently as a team? You know what that does? It makes us better.
True. But, I mean, this point was raised in the podcast of these smaller, more rural places theoretically should have a higher clearance rate, a higher success rate, because there's fewer crimes, fewer people, more people know everybody, more people are there to notice when something is wrong or someone's behaving oddly, and yet that's not the case. Or where we even know what the case is, that's not the case, which is, it's terrible. It's real bad. Any closing thoughts? Last thoughts?
Yes. My very last question for you, which was something that kept coming to mind throughout while I was listening to this podcast. As you were listening, did this feel like a 9-year-old podcast to you?
Oh,
we've listened to a lot of podcasts. We've listened to older podcasts. We've listened to more recent, newer, kind of more modern podcasts. And I'm just wondering.
Mostly no. A little bit yes.
Interesting. What's a little bit?
I think the yes is in sort of the construction of it. And I feel like if it was made today, some of the elements of it would be different. I think it would be a little bit more, I mean, we listen to podcasts that are made in the last couple of years that are over a pretty wide spectrum of styles and sort of structures. But I feel like it would be maybe less far-reaching. I feel like it'd be narrower.
More focused. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, actually, that I hadn't considered. Maybe narrower with like 7 bonus episodes.
Sure. Yeah.
Like maybe one on like, have you also heard how this county has fucked up this investigation and whatever, like as a separate episode, like an offshoot.
Or a second series, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. No, I didn't. I just like it. I think it hit me maybe around episode 6 or so. I was like, Jesus, this came out in 2016.
Yeah.
This is like very up there. I was in, and I know we got this recommendation from a listener. Shout out to Brendan. Thank you so much. A listener who was from the area. Jacob, very close to where Jacob Wetterling went missing, and around the same age, so kind of has like a very personal, I suppose, connection to the story. Kind of grew up knowing a lot about it, and so had said, you know, this podcast is excellent. It's an older podcast, but it's so good, and it's one that he kept like coming back to in his mind. So glad for that, because we often look for the more recent podcast, but this is up there, Jeff, and I didn't feel the 9 years on it at all.
Yeah, I think I would say that's overwhelmingly my impression too. I also, one other thing I want to note about this is one of those rare podcasts that we listen to where when I mentioned what I was listening to just random non-true crime fan folks, there are several people who had listened to it. I think this one kind of crossed that line, and I ran into several people who knew the story and knew this podcast.
Physically ran into, like, while you were running?
Yes. Physically knocked over several people. And then as I was helping them up or standing over them, you know, trying to keep listening. Anyway.
Sorry, I'm busy listening to In the Dark Season 1.
Sorry,
Jacob
the
Wetterling.
pause button isn't working. I'm just going to keep running.
I don't want to miss anything. I'm taking my notes. Yeah. Oh, also, like, complete side note, can you believe they merged the fucking sketches? Whose idea was that? They need to, like, not have that idea ever again.
Yeah, the sketch thing we didn't talk about.
Why would you merge the sketches? Like, that makes no sense. That is what you do as a party game. It's like, like, you know, in a bachelorette party when you're like, oh, let's all draw a picture of the bachelor or the groom, and then we'll like merge them together and it'll be a funny picture. Like, that's the time you do that. Like, it's not when you're like, let's say 5 different victims in 5 different states. Let's just merge all those pictures together and be like, everybody, let's look for this person who might be 60 or might be 20.
Yeah.
Could be black, could be white, could be from I don't know where. Seriously.
Around the time I listened to that episode, one of the other podcasts, non-true crime podcasts I listened to, The Economics of Everyday Things, which is a Freakonomics spinoff, did an episode on police sketches and just like how they're done. And it had some overlap, but it went into more detail on just like, it was like a 20-minute podcast. It's pretty quick, but it was interesting.
Are we recommending to friends? Friendses?
Oh, for sure. I would definitely recommend this. Would you?
100%.
Yeah. This is a very good podcast. All right. Before we go, if you have listened to In the Dark or you just listened to us talk about In the Dark, let us know what you think. Leave a comment. You can leave a comment on this episode in Spotify or Apple. You can reach out to us on Instagram. We're on TikTok. We're on YouTube. Also, leave us a rating on Apple, Spotify, wherever you are. Let us know what you think. And while you're at that, tell a friend about this show. Tell all your friends. Tell everyone you know. We appreciate it. Thank you. All right, Dee, I wanted to take us somewhere different from these last couple of crimes we've covered.
I'm excited.
Question for you. How much sympathy do you find yourself having for...
None. Sorry.
That might be the right answer. Billionaire pharma execs.
Oof. Okay. Generally speaking, none, but I have complicated feelings also. Okay. Go on.
What about major philanthropists? People who give away tons of money to good causes.
Did you just explain what a philanthropist was to me in case I was unsure?
It's for the listeners.
Is that what you did?
It's not for you always. Sometimes it's for the listeners.
Was it a little bit for me?
We're going to explore the mysterious deaths of billionaire Canadian pharma giant Barry Sherman and his philanthropist wife, Honey, from December of 2017. Who killed them? Why did they get killed? And another question, did they have too much money? This is one of the richest couples in all of Canada. We're going to be previewing a podcast called The No Good, Terribly Kind, Wonderful Lives, and Tragic Deaths of Barry and Honey Sherman from CBC. It's a very long title. That's on the next So Much Crime,
So Little Time.
So Much Crime, So Little Time is a production of Mind Glove Media. The executive producer is Paxton Caloriso. Our associate producer is Blythe Ty. Our theme music was composed by Vyacheslav Starostin. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to this show on your podcast app. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and a review. Even better, tell your friends. To join the discussion, look for us on social media. Check out the show notes for all the links. Thanks for listening.